Go. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udhu billah min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillah fala mudilla lah. Wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluh sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin, amma ba'd. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be continuing discussing the book Al-Arba'in An-Nawawiyya, as it's referred to as, and we had ended the 30th hadith in the last session. That's the case? So today, inshallah ta'ala, that will be starting the hadith that follows, which is hadith Hadi wa Thalathun, which is the 31st hadith in this collection. And that's the hadith which is the hadith of hadith Abu Abbas. We'll read the hadith and then we'll start the discussion related to this particular hadith and the benefit and the benefits that can be taken from the hadith. So the hadith will be read both in Arabic and English. Then we'll start discussing the hadith bi'awnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Bismillahi wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Hadith number 31, the true asceticism. عن أبي العباس سهل ابن سعيد الساعدي رضي الله تعالى عنه قال: جاء رجل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فقال: يا رسول الله، دلني على عمل إذا عملته أحبني الله وأحبني الناس. فقال: ازهد في الدنيا يحبك الله، وازهد فيما عند الناس يحبك الناس. رواه ابن ماجه وغيره بأسانيد حسنة. On the authority of Abu al-Abbas Sahl ibn Sa'idi السعيدي that he said, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Messenger of Allah, direct me to an action that if I do it will cause Allah and the people to love me. He said, be an ascetic in this world and Allah will love you. Renounce what the people possess and the people will love you. Hadith Hasan, related by Ibn Majah and other than him, with sound narrations.
Yes, that's the hadith that is mentioned as the 31st hadith in this collection of An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. So after reading the hadith, that he mentioned, that's I'm not sure in your book, in my book, after I mentioned the hadith, he called Hadithun Hasan, Rawahu Ibn Majah, wa ghayru bi asanid hasana. Do you have?
Yeah.
After the end, as I finished the hadith, Hadithun Hasan. You have that?
Bi asnadi.
Now before that, before he said Rawahu Ibn Majah, is there anything before this?
No.
Okay, so in my book in Arabic, that maybe that's let me just check more than one print to see. Ibn Rajab. So even the one of Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned after the hadith, he mentioned Hadithun Hasanun Rawahu Ibn Majah wa ghayru bi asanid hasana. Nam? Okay, so some of you have that and some don't, in the translation.
Yeah, after the translation we have Rawahu ibn Majah wa ghayru.
Okay, khalas. Okay then. So that's concerning. So that's the first matter that we normally discuss. Is we discuss something regarding takhrij of the hadith. Then we go into discussing something regarding the Sahabi that if we have not mentioned him before. So based upon what is written here, we mention and Abi Abbas Salih bin Sa'idi indicates that this person, this Sahabi, was not mentioned before because he had mentioned him by his full name and also by his kunya. So whenever this is done, it indicates that the hadith, that this Sahabi is being mentioned for the first time, as the practice of Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, that whenever he mention a Sahabi for the first time, that he will mention him by his name and his kunya. Nam. So we said full name and his kunya, so as we to be familiar with that Sahabi. So as for this, we said we don't want to do what takhrij first. So we start regarding concern the Sahabi first. So I mentioned Sal, his name. So I mentioned his kunya, Abu Abbas. Some mention that his kunya is Abu Yahya. So you have a difference regarding his kunya. So what is mentioned here that is mentioned here, Abu al-Abbas. But there's also that mention yuqal, that it is said that is also referred to as Abu Yahya. So it could be that he has that there's a difference, or he has two kunya. Could be that he has two kunya. Abu Abbas is more renowned for, and also Abu Yahya also could be said to be of his kunya. As a person sometimes may have more than one kunya. Then I mentioned as for his ism, his name, as mentioned here, Sal ibn Sa'd as-Sa'idi. Sal ibn Sa'd as-Sa'idi. And he's said to be from Al-Ansar. So he's from the Al-Ansar. And also his father is said to be Sa'd, also a Sahabi. So they mention when they mention an Abi Abbas, Sa'd ibn Sa'd as-Sa'idi, rata'ala anhu, then what is more, they said to be said, rata'ala anhuma. So what is more befitting to be written, rata'ala anhuma, as him, the son and the father are both Sahaba. So he mentioned his father, rata'ala anhu, that he died concerned tawafa abuhu wa huwa, that regarding his preparation for Badr. So the father in preparation for Badr, the battle of Badr, that he passed away. And also is Khazraji. And Sa'idi is concerned, I mentioned that particular name, that lineage go back to his granddad, Sa'ida ibn Kab ibn Khazraj. That's his grandfather. They mention that Sahal, that the Prophet ﷺ passed away when Sahal was at the age of 15. And Sahal, that he passed away, eventually he passed away, Yaqil, that is said that he passed away the year 88 Al-Hijri, or 91. So they discussed, or they mentioned that he passed away in the year 88 Al-Hijri, or 91. And it is mentioned هو آخر من مات يعني بالمدينة من الصحابة. It is stated, it is mentioned that he may be the last among the Sahaba to pass away from those of Medina. Even though it is mentioned what is mashhur, even though it is mentioned also that Jabir rata'ala anhu is the last among the Sahaba to pass away of those in Medina. But so that's concerning. So of the last among the Sahaba, that Sal is mentioned of those of the last amongst them to pass away from the Sahaba, of those of residing in Medina. Also of his hadith, Sal, that he have hadith, as also mentioned Bukhari and Muslim and other books of hadith. So something brief regarding that particular Sahabi, and also just to add regarding concerning his name, Sahal, something which is easy, that that name of him was changed. So his name, previous name, said not his name by birth. He wanted to give his name concerning Hazana. His name was Hazana, like Hazan means something. So his name was Hazana. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he changed his name to Sal. So Hazana means something like that sorry, something difficult to Sal. So changing his name was done because his first name was Hazana or Hazan. So it shows regarding the permissibility of changing a person's name if it have meaning which is not befitting, meaning that is not befitting and proper. So also from this we see that the Prophet ﷺ, that he changed his name based upon the name that he had, his previous name, Hazan, sorry, of things of sadness. His name concerning Hazan of sadness, that his name was changed to Sal, making something more easy. So his name was changed. So it shows regarding even some of the Sahaba that they changed, few had their name changed because the meaning of their names, that it implied thing which is unpleasant. So they would change their name because their name implied or had meaning that was not pleasant. It is mentioned by Abu Dawood rahimahullah ta'ala regarding concern of some ulama who have mentioned. So that's concerning, before go the next point, before we go to that point, that the next point is, so mention something about the Sahabi. The next point of the hadith is matters relating to takhrij of the hadith. So discussion regarding the what have been mentioned by the ulama regarding the grading of this hadith. So as for those who have narrated or those who have collected this hadith that he mentioned here, annahu rahimahullah ta'ala rawahu ibn Majah, wa ghayruhu, and others, so Ibn Majah and others, bi asanid hasana. Even though he mentioned that so Ibn rahimahullah kind of somewhat give the understanding or pass the judgment the hadith, it is hasan. As he mentioned, hadithun hasan rawahu Ibn Majah wa ghayru bi asanid hasana, indicating the hadith it is graded as hasan. But as for sources that have mentioned this hadith, they mentioned here Ibn Majah, also Uqayli in his book Ad-Du'afa Al-Kabir, Ibn Nu'aym in his book Al-Hilya, also Al-Hakim in his book Al-Mustadrak, Bayhaqi in Shu'ab Al-Iman, Tabarani in Mujam Al-Kabir, Ibn Adi in his book Kamil, Ibn Hibban in a book that, yes, so Ibn Hibban rahimahullah ta'ala as a book that's called Rawdatul Uqala. Ibn Hibban as a book that discusses concerning things regarding character and mannerism, that he has a book that's called Rawdatul Uqala. So his more famous book, Sahih Ibn Hibban, it is not mentioned there, but he mentioned it's another of his books that discuss concerning things of adab wal suluk, and others who have narrated this hadith, But of the source that the author mentioned, and now we mentioned Ibn Majah only. So before we discuss concerning the hadith, as for just concerning the points regarding Ibn Majah that have been mentioned, that Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala so Ibn Majah is of kutub of the, whatever for that, kutub as-sitta, the 6 books of hadith, Ibn Majah being the 6th of the 6 books of hadith, and maybe the more famous. So within kutub as-sitta, all famous, should be known to most Muslim, but Ibn Majah is the less renowned amongst them. With me? So Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala, that his name, that is kunya Abu Abdullah, his name Muhammad ibn Yazid ibn Majah al-Qazwini. Muhammad ibn Yazid ibn Majah Qazwini, and they have authored many books or several books of his work that are mentioned. This book is Sunan, he has a book At-Tarikh, and also Tafsir. So there's a book in Tafsir, Tariq, and also a Sunan. And the one that has of his works that are more renowned is a Sunan. And that's clear. So they mentioned regarding concerning Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala that Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala as referred to by way of laqab, regarding concerning that to explain his level of knowledge, his standing regarding amongst the ulama, is referred to as Al-Hafiz. He mentioned Al-Imam, Al-Hafiz, Al-Kabir, Al-Hujjah, Wal-Mufassir. So these are the titles that is given by Al-Dhahabi and others. So Imam, Hafiz, Kabir, Hujjah, and Mufassir, as the other work in Tafsir. Ibn Majah. So of the things regarding these alqab that sometimes are titles that are given to Mashaykh and ulama, that generally concern these titles, that you find that at times you find where a person may be deserving of those titles, and at times, especially in more contemporary times, that titles are given where those things need to be have to be cautious. So titles sometimes are given to Mashaykh, where at times one have to be cautious in the title that are given to individuals, meaning concern amongst the Mashaykh. Nam, we find that and sometimes that is where people sometimes they go into ghulu regarding the mashayikh that they align themselves with, as how they may describe them, and titles that they're given to them, where sometimes it becomes a form of gulu. It's kind of somewhat where people go over the board in giving titles, where at times, yes, the shaykh may be of a person of respect and of honor, but not to the degree and the titles that have been given to him. And also you find at the second where people kind of somewhat they try to degrade the ulama by removing of any title that they may be deserving. But the thing is that for a person to do those things in a measured way. So regarding of giving out titles and the use of these titles, especially regarding of the ulama, that stick to what have been mentioned by those of the kibar ulama. So if someone of the past and being discussed by the ulama of past, if Al-Dhahabi, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Taymiyyah, and whoever from the ulama that are well known, that are given a person a certain title, then we can work with that because it's given for a person that is well known and established. And that person themselves is accepted, that he's a renown amongst the ulama. And known to so, you can work with what is mentioned by the kibar. As for the titles that are given by people, by the student to their teachers, then be careful. Titles are given by way of the student, especially with those students that are not known to be of the more well-grounded and balanced, well-grounded amongst that teacher, student, then be careful. Because sometimes titles are given as a form of kind of somewhat to overly elevate that sheikh. Sometimes it is given to overly elevate that sheikh, and also so it is sometimes used for that purpose, where people, and also to draw attention to themselves. So titles sometimes are used outside it's what it's intended for, or how it to be used, but rather it is used for other reasons, either to overly praise that sheikh, and also used to that, and also people remove title from a sheikh so as to degrade them. So it's especially concerned in our time to be mindful and to be careful that a person referred to as such and such, see, who amongst the kibar ulama have said such and such. So you find a person, for example, in our time, that a person is being called such and such is Al-Imam, Wal-Hafiz, Al-Mujahid, Al-Muhaddith, and whatever title that are given. Just ask, who amongst the kibar ulama have used those titles? But again, who do you deem to be the kibar? With me? So that will also become our next discussion. For that person, you are giving that sheikh all these titles. Can you give us the isnad, the chain that you're following, or that you're using as reference regarding who amongst the kibar ulama of our time, or of any time, have given that person those titles? So the point is that to stay within something which is balance. So you might find in most cases, you'll find people like the kibar ulama, of whom will be the likes Sheikh Fawzan, Sheikh Muhsin Abad, of those who are still alive. They have Sheikh Al-Mufti in Imam Mamlaka, Sheikh Abdulaziz Ali Sheikh, Sheikh the previous Sheikh Saleh Ali Sheikh, and the likes, Sheikh Abdul Karim Al-Khudair, Sheikh Abdulaziz Al-Raji, Sheikh Abdulaziz Barrak. How do they refer to other people? And when they may speak of praise of a person, how do they go about doing so? With me? So you find that those kibar, do they take the line of being, using these big grand titles, or is it something you find amongst the lower ranks of Talabatul Ilm? With me? So do not go with the low rank Tulabul Ilm, and even but go with the kibar ulama as to the titles that they give to others and how they praise others. Then so that's considered with Ibn Majah rahimahullah. We have the kibar ulama who have praised him. So should a person deserving of those titles, because it comes from reputable sources that themselves are LTB kibar al-ulama. As for the matter regarding Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala Qazwini, that the year of his birth, 209, so 209 al-Hijri, and is dead 273. So is that 273 al-Hijri. as for his book, that's concerning him in brief. As for the book As-Sunan Ibn Majah, that is the book of that we're interested in more so, are being discussed. That the book As-Sunan that describes certain verse As-Sunan, and that's of the line of book that discuss concerning Ahadith التي يستدل به العلماء على أبواب يستدل به في أبواب الفقه. So Ahadith that are used in أبواب الفقه. So the book of Sunan, the purpose of that book is to mention Ahadith that are used by the ulama as regarding affairs that relates to fiqh. Tahara, Salat, Zakat, Siyam, Hajj, Mu'amalat. So this book is follow that system. But also Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala said in Ghalib, also you have added other chapters regarding things that outside of fiqh, so things addition to fiqh related matters. So you have a book which is of the first book, Abwab as-Sunnah. Abwab as-Sunnah, that it covers matter that relates to Aqidah. Also he has a book Abwab al-Fitan. Abwab al-Fitan, also of those other things that he adds to this book, and also Kitab Zuhd wa Kitab al-Adab. So you have these additional bab or chapters that relates to other topics that are outside al-fiqh. Kitab or Abwab as-Sunan, Abwab al-Fitan, and the likes. So al-Adab is a part of, included normally in the books of al-fiqh. As for the manzila, the status of the book, Sunan Ibn Majah, that the ulama mentioned that the first of those that Ibn Majah was not initial, that it became, is considered to be the sixth book of Kutub al-Sitta. Kutub al-Sitta, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, then Ibn Majah. That's Kutub al-Sitta. So as for the first five, that they are known as Kutub al-Khamsa, then eventually Ibn Majah was added as the sixth. And at some point there was a discussion between the ulama as to which book should take the place as being the six books of Kutub al-Sitta. So they agree, so said the one that was somewhat established, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i. A discussion between the ulama as to which is the sixth book. Others, some put Al-Muwatta, and then some put forward Ibn Majah, and that now become Ibn Majah become the accepted practice. That Ibn Majah became, and the established practice is that Kutub al-Sitta, the sixth book in this collection is Ibn Majah. That becomes now the established approach. Regarding this, they mentioned the first of those to include Ibn Majah as the first of Kutub al-Sitta, as the sixth book in Kutub al-Sitta. To include Ibn Majah as a part of Kutub al-Sitta, that they mention of the first who have done so, that it is Abu Fadl Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi. Abu Fadl Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi. So Abu Fadl Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi, he has a book that is called Atraf Kutub al-Sitta. Atraf Kutub al-Sitta. So this Atraf will mention a hadith, a section or portion of a hadith that are within Kutub al-Sitta. So it includes Ibn Majah. So this book Atraf Kutub al-Sitta, where they mention a portion of each hadith, so it include Ibn Majah within those six books. Six books where they mention a portion of those the hadith in these six books. But he included Ibn Majah as one of them. And also he has a second book that is called Shurut A'immat al-Sitt. A'immat al-Sitta, Shurut A'immat al-Sitta. So it include where he mentioned the shurut, the condition, or discuss something regarding Kutub al-Sitta, but he include Ibn Majah, where he discuss what are the condition of these six books. So after first, after of them to take the position that Ibn Majah to be included at Kutub al-Sitta. Now then others then follow suit. And amongst them that we have Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi in his book Kamal fi Asma al-Rijal. Al-Kamal fi Asma al-Rijal, that he include Ibn Majah as the six books in hadith. And then I said no, that became now the established practice. That became the established practice that Kutub al-Sitta, the one that take the sixth position is Ibn Majah. But said initially at some point before there was a khilaf between ulama, a difference between the ulama as to which is the 6 books of those who mention Al-Muwatta, like those who mention Ad-Darimi being the 6th book. So you have a khilaf between the ulama at some point, but eventually what became the established practice that Ibn Majah, it is the 6th book. So that's concerning that matter regarding Ibn Majah. We mentioned that Ibn Majah rahimahullah regarding his collection not as renowned and widely studied as the others. So the others, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, that they are more covered compared to Ibn Majah, but it's included, and also to some degree there's some efforts around the book of Ibn Majah. With Ibn Majah compared to the other books of Kutub al-Sittah or Kutub al-Khamsa, amongst Kutub al-Sittah, Ibn Majah being one that is said to be of the ones with the most weak hadith compared to the others. So if we compare Ibn Majah with others, more so Al-Arba, Sunan Arba, it has more weak hadith, even Al-Mawdu' compared to others. So Ibn Majah have more criticism or weak hadith compared to the other 3 books, which would be Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i. To the extent that I mentioned that there's weak or hadith which are Mawdu', fabricated in Ibn Majah, in his Sunan. So Ibn Lakin, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned regarding concerning Amma Sunan Ibn Majah, Sunan Ibn Majah, the Abi Abdullah Ibn Majah, then he mentioned wa akthar as-Sunan al-Arba, it's the most amongst the 4 books of Sunan da'afan, in having weak hadith, of a lot weak, wa fihi mawdu'at, and in it contains hadith that are said to be mawdu'at, fabricated. And that's Ibn Malakin. Also As-Sakhawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned Amma Kitab Ibn Majah فإنه تفرد بأحاديث and rijal, that they mentioned that Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala, the meaning of which Sakhawi mentioned that Ibn Majah in his book, that he has hadith that is particular to him, that he has singled out certain narrators a hadith that have rijal muttamin, that they are bil-kadhib, that they are accused of lying, وسرق al-hadith, and also that they have stolen hadith, meaning hadith al-mawdu'. That I mentioned mimma hukima alayh, of hadith that have been graded bil-butlan, that they are invalid, was sukut wal nakara, so that indicate the hadith that they are very weak, that yes, so compared to the other books of the Sunan Ibn Majah that have more hadith that are said to be of a weaker grading, unto the extent contain hadith that are said to be mawdu'. Back to Takhrij, sorry, I kind of somewhat, we didn't get a final judgment on hadith. So I mentioned Ibn Majah, but as we mentioned regarding Takhrij of the hadith, so I mentioned that of the source of the hadith, we mentioned that Ibn Majah, Daraqutni, we mentioned Ibn Majah, Uqayli. So of those sources that mentioned the hadith that have been read, Ibn Majah, Uqayli, Abu Na'im, Hakim, Bayhaqi, Tabarani, Ibn Adi, Ibn Hibban. I would say Ibn Hibban, not in his As-Sahih, in another of his book, Rawdatul Uqala by Ibn Hibban, and others who have narrated this hadith. So a discussion that I mentioned that one, and now rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that hadith is Sahih, or Hadithun Hasan, that he mentioned bi asanid hasana, that hadith rawahu Ibn Majah wa ghayru bi asanid hasana. So from this it's understood that An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, that he owed this hadith, he graded this hadith as Hasan. He graded this hadith as Hasan. As for that discussion, that of those who have explained Arba'in, and also give some attention to takhrij of hadith and also discussing the hadith being the grading of hadith, Ibn Rajab put some emphasis on this. So he mentioned, after I mentioned that concerning hadith, وهذا hadith خرجه ابن ماجه من رواية خالد ابن عمر القرشي and Sufyan al-Thawri and Abi Hazim and Sal ibn Sa'd al-Hadith. So can I mention the isnad? Then I mentioned that فقد ذكر الشيخ رحمه الله تعالى يعني النووي أن إسناده حسن, that النووي رحمه الله mentioned that his isnad of this hadith is Hasan. That's Ibn Rajab mentioned that the grading that have been passed on this hadith by An-Nawawi, we mentioned Shaykh ذكر الشيخ رحمه الله أن إسناده حسن, that's the judgment or the grading of Nawawi. Nam, then he mentioned وفي ذلك نظر, regarding that judgment passed by An-Nawawi that the hadith is Hasan. Ibn Rajab is saying وفي ذلك نظر, that in this there's thing to be looked into. He said that's a nice way of saying that I disagree with him. فيه نظر, he means to know that what he has said needs to be looked into. In a nice way of saying that I disagree. Nam, so then he mentioned reason why. فإن خالد ibn Amr al-Khurashi Amawi, then he mentioned there's some kalam about him. Then he mentioned قال فيه أحمد munkar hadith. So you find the ulama, so you have that, so regarding the isnad that you have mentioned, that the isnad it goes with Khalid ibn Amr al-Khurashi and Sufyan al-Thawri and Abi Hazim and Sal ibn Sa'd al-Hadith. He mentioned that this narrator Khalid ibn Amr al-Khurashi, there's some kalam about him. And severe. So they mentioned Ahmad ibn Hanbal قال munkar hadith, قال مرة ليس بثقة. من أحمد رحمه الله I've also mentioned ليس بثقة يروي أحاديث بواتين, that he narrates بواتين, that are weak, severe weak. وقال ابن معين, also Ibn Ma'in رحمه الله تعالى mentioned ليس حديثه بشيء, that his hadith they are nothing. وكان كذابا يكذب, and he was like a liar and he used to lie and would lie. So you have those, and I mentioned حدث عن شعبة أحاديث موضوعة, that he narrates upon شعبة hadith which is موضوعة. Nam, so can somewhat قال Bukhari or Abu Zur'a munkar hadith. So you have that وأبو حاتم متروك الحديث ضعيف. So you find that answers that those that kibar ulama of hadith, those names that have been mentioned of them, Ahmad, Ibn Ma'in, Bukhari, Abu Zur'a, Abu Hatim, Al-Razi, that those are concerned Ibn Adi, ila what hadith, as I mentioned, that the person is close to those like fabricate hadith. So those are the kibar, the cream of the ulama of hadith. These are kibar, the main ulama of hadith, where their aqwal will decide what's the ruling and judgment passed on narrators. These are the ones that their judgment on narrator will decide what judgment is passed on him. Nam, so those aqwal are very somewhat indicate the person is weak. That it indicate that the narrator is weak. So An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned the person hadith Hasan, that he mentioned, that he kind of somewhat mentioned that rawahu Ibn Majah wa ghayruhu bi asanid hasana, mean that there's other asanid that may strengthen this hadith, but even this one itself is da'if jiddan. That isnad, this particular isnad also, it is da'if, very weak. So the hadith is very weak, it becomes difficult for it to be, so there's some aqwa that goes with it. But overall, that the isnad, there's what is mentioned by now rahimahullah ta'ala regarding Khalid, based upon Khalid being present in the isnad, it makes the hadith being da'if. And that's the more correct of the judgment regarding this hadith, that the hadith is da'if, based upon Khalid ibn Amr al-Qurashi. Nam, so they say the hadith is Hasan, is somewhat difficult to pass judgment of this hadith being Hasan, because of the statements that have been mentioned regarding him by those ai Nam. So that's concerned that there's also said that with Arba'in Nawawi that you have hadith that are da'if. So this would be one of those. Another of those hadith are said to be da'if in Arba'in Nawawi. Nam. Aywa.
Excuse me if you might have covered it before, but those hadith that are da'if, in terms of working with them, using them as evidence and things like that, are they left?
Either not answer that in Ahkam, then no. In Ahkam, then no. They are overall regard of the ulama who concern any hadith is daif, then it is not to be used as a proof. Cannot be used as a proof or evidence. So we have discussed the narrator, takhrij, I would say the final judgment of the hadith, but we have said as brief, we have takhrij of the hadith, that the hadith is considered to be daif. You have some mutabat of the hadith, but overall that they mention this hadith is something which is, this hadith is daif, contrary to what is mentioned by An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. So at times also you find that also in the sense of hadith, especially regarding those hadith are said to be that the judgment of hadith between the ulama, that they are clear regarding hadith being sahih. They find that aqwal of the ulama, that hadith is sahih, that everyone move in that direction. So that hadith becomes clear, it is sahih. They have a next set with the ulama all go in the same direction, the hadith is daif. Nam?
Which seems to be the case on this one.
That's all that point. That point.
Okay.
Where we're at. So you find that direction refer the majority of the ulama that they are going in the direction the hadith is daif. Nam. Then you find of some hadith that in between, that they've said that some may agree to be hasan and some may agree to be daif. So you find the area of I use the word contention between the ulama, although you have discussion between the ulama of hadith at times lie between that middle level of hadith being graded as hasan. That's the area you find that more of a discussion regarding is this hadith. So said daif clear at times, and at times sahih it is clear because of those conditions. But now hasan become that level, that grade of hadith where you might find more of a discussion between the ulama. Is the hadith actually closer to sahih or it is closer to daif? Nam. So you find that the area of hadith being graded as hasan is more the area you have to be review things more thoroughly and investigate more. Type. So you might find that because of this, we said that area of hasan being the area of contention or discussion of that require further research. That you might find that, as we said, for example, this hadith, our hadith at end, that we said the aqwal of the ulama of the classical ones, the kibar of Imam said nuqad al-kibar. Nam, Bukhari, Abu Zur'a, Abu Hatim al-Razi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ibn Ma'in. If they're saying, go in the line that a hadith is daif, they'll find that one of the ulama of latter time going somewhat contrary to what they're saying. Nam, Bukhari, Abu Zur'a, Abu Hatim, Ahmad, Ibn Adi, and the likes, that they're saying that go in the path that hadith is daif. Then how is it? And of someone coming after, like in our case, this hadith, to say, give a judgment contrary to the direct, contrary to what is the view taken by the majority of those ai''imah. With me? So you find our discussion, because you have a discussion of it in the hadith science regarding that at times you might find this. The ulama of, we use the word, use the ones of old, the classical ones, I will mention these names. Nam, if they are somewhat saying something, and you find someone who come after them, Nawawi, Iraqi, and even those of our contemporary, that's somewhat going against the grain of what they're saying. Clear? Should we go with the older ones, the ones of old, or the ones who have more of contemporary or latter day, what information that they have that the ones of old did not have, to make their judgment different from the ones of old. Clear? So you find that discussion between some of the ulama that at times you might find that this is a case, the older of the A'immat al-Kibar of old, the Qudama, they're saying something, but then someone of latter time is saying something that is not going in line with them. You understand? Which of those is given more precedent? The older ones or the latter day ones? The latter ones and contemporary of information that those one did not have.
Is that conceivable?
Hey, possible, but that's a discussion. So did they have information? What is that they're working with for them to come to a conclusion that seemed to be contrary, different from the ones of old? You with me? So it could be possible, but is that the reality? So all this will be based upon what they put regarding concerning whatever judgment is passed on the hadith, then that will be what you have put forward. What information that you have put forward that seem to be that will go against the grain of those ulama of past. What information that from what you have put in your judgment that seems to be that somewhat justify your hukum compared to what those of old are saying. With me? So go back to those matters. It goes back to certain, so that's the thing. So you might find that of others who can somewhat take the line that in passing judgment and hadith, then the person first step one, you have to track or try to investigate and research what is the judgment passed by the ulama of present if they are giving judgment. So first step, before you look and see as to what judgment on the hadith that may have been given by the ulama of past. You must have that, try to source that information first. We're discussing a hadith, this hadith, not, you understand, someone of latter time, what's the latter time, plus contemporary, have passed a judgment. Okay, what was mentioned by the ulama before you, before the time of Nawawi, Ibn Hajar, Iraqi, Sakhawi, Suyuti, those are latter day scholars. Albani, Arnaut, the scholars of before them, do we have any information regarding them passing a judgment on that hadith? So that becomes now the thing regarding of the study of hadith, that a proper study would include this and must include this. The person must research to see what the judgment of the ulama of past on the hadith. Maybe they didn't say anything, but first you have to investigate. And either their judgment on the judgment of hadith will be either, and a lot of cases not direct. Sometimes it's not that direct, this hadith is daif. It could be judgment passed on hadith based upon the narrator. So their judgment sometimes is the narrator. With a mention, yes, and I mentioned narrator, and also is hadith. So they mentioned, for example, in this one, they said that I mentioned concern that they mentioned yarwi ahadith bawatin. That means that they are aware that he narrate hadith, but they're given an insight regarding a lot of his hadith or all his hadith fihi bawatin are false hadith. So it's a very understand. So you can use this as a means to have an understanding regarding this personal hadith. Can I mention yarwi ahadith? So discussing his narration, bawatin. So can someone give some insight that they see that his hadith that he narrates that they're weak, even though they did not mention a specific hadith, but can someone give a ruling regarding most of what he narrates needs to be checked thoroughly. Or it might mention that mention munkar hadith, or I mentioned here hadas an Shu'bah a hadith mawdu'a, that he narrates hadith and Shu'bah mawdu'a. So let's see if any of his narration go back to Shu'bah, then even know that the hadith, avoid it. Meaning avoid concern the hadith is very weak. So at times the narration, it may go back to is hadith, or at times they may pass particular judgment and particular hadith, but overall is the researcher searching to know what have been said by the ulama of the past on a hadith. So the books that are there that can give us that information or give us that insight, then we refer back to those books. Refer back to those books. So you might find that of some who may criticize or maybe not criticize, but may disagree. So slash the word that may disagree of some of the judgments of ahadith, of ulama of latter time and contemporary. It is based upon that something they mentioned that they didn't per se mention or things of ulama of the past in their final judgment on hadith. But overall, that said no, but it's important. That's important regarding instead of hadith, and a more detailed level, more advanced level, that a person that he tried to source regarding any hadith that been discussed, what have been mentioned by the ulama of past, a'immatul kibar. Then to see what have been said of those who came after, then take things from there. So said, just like in matters, in any matters, in fiqh even, we have the same approach. And in tafsir, what have been said by the salaf, a'immat al-awail, al-qudama, what's their statements, what's their ruling, what they have to say about a matter before we go to those who came after them. If you can source that, then that's always better and the best of reference to know what have been said by the ulama of past, but also not to completely dismiss and disregard what have been said by the ulama who came after them, but to have both sources or access to both, then that's always more beneficial. To know what have been said by the ulama of the past, ruling on hadith or other matters, then go to those who came after of contemporary or latter day time scholars. With that, inshallah ta'ala, so as we mentioned that with Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, that at times he will discuss the hadith first by discussing takhrij and also hukum upon the hadith, which is good to know concerning that, what have been mentioned by the ulama regarding that hadith of al-arba'in. So Ibn Rajab regarding knowing the hukum on the hadith and takhrij of hadith, he can somewhat put some effort into that. Others may not. Others said that others just go straight into explain the hadith without critiquing much the judgment of the hadith. So said that so this also said is that Ashar of Arba'in. So that this one is in 2 volumes. I see this one, the one that I use, that they come very thick, unfortunately. Now, alhamdulillah, good. Unfortunately for the person who's the student and the listener. So said this and the next one, they're the same size. So this one is the volume 2, as we have so this one, it has over 880 something pages. This is just volume 1. This is a volume 2. And it's over close to 900 page. Close to 900 page. So this is a short regarding concerning Al-Fat. So there's a Al-Fat al-Mubin bi Shar al-Arba'in by Al-Haythami. So Ibn Hajar. So you have Ibn Hajar to Ibn Hajar. Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and Ibn Hajar al-Haythami. Both are Shafi'i, but this one he came after. So you have his own explanation of Arba'in, but then others came also, and I've said the Aba al-Hashiyah, but also have like some footnotes for the explanation on some of his points. So this is like a newer print. It was printed before, but then this one comes with a Hashiyah that have some extra information, but it's a new print, but it comes in 2 volumes. So that I said that of the things allowing it, that you might find certain people that they try to collect all the older explanation of a particular book. You understand? So try to get as much of the older explanation of Al-Arba'in than So this is another one which is recent print type of thing. Both said to know that many shuru of Arba'in, but also to get some to see what have been mentioned by those of the past, of them the more renowned Ibn Rajab, but also you have this one and others. So that inshallah will end for today. And from you or from Aywa?
You know, like the scholars of the past, you want to put off camera?
Okay.
Scholars of the past, the issue of the kadab in the chain of narration, didn't they get that the person was like that before, or you understand what I'm saying? Like when they were using the hadith, was it not found out that the person was like that? The first set of people to make the hadith sahih. Was it not found out that the person kadab was a kadab before?
To make the hadith sahih?
No, you know the person
The narrator who said to be kadhab, they agreed that all the person to be kadhab. Aywa. Did they know this before?
No.
Before what?
No, I mean until recently, I don't know how to explain it. You know the ones that graded the hadith sahih.
Okay.
Didn't know the person was a kadab before.
And
Now we're saying it has to be also.
okay.
You don't know that this miracle was.
Okay, so you're talking about like in this. Some that it may vary. Maybe he's aware, but he comes to see that may come to still his own conclusion. So he might find that you understand, after seeing the evidence, he may still come to his own conclusion based upon he may be following certain principles regarding ilm al-hadith that maybe itself that those principles may not, may be a more easier approach. Yes, so he has certain principles. We said, okay, as he mentioned that, as he said, hadithun hasanun rawahu ibn Majah wa ghayru bi asanid hasana. Asanid hasana meaning that the hadith here have other asanid, other chains. So when all of them combine together, they give strength. Where you see it as, where you might find that becomes now the issue. Does every hadith or those hadith that may be by itself, it is weak, but because there's other narrations, other chains, does they automatically strengthen each other regardless? That may be the issue. Where because they have maybe 5 other isnad, kalas, 5 other isnad, it have a base that they call Hasan, but maybe those 5 may not still mean anything, may not amount to much. So you have a thing they discuss concerning taqwit al-hadith, how to strengthen hadith. There's rules, but sometimes some are more, some maybe more lenient. You with me?
No.
So you sometimes may have those matters.
Would this hadith fall into what you just mentioned?
No, I can't say that to say yes, I can't say that. But I said that goes back to we just judge things for what is apparent. But just talking about as a principle, as for that being applied to this case, Allahu Alam.
Just summarize, I think this particular hadith is saying that Nawawi said, he said it's Hasan, by the Asceticism and everything like that. But then Ibn Rajab, he commented and said, based on evidence, what he knows, he said basically the hadith is da'if, he's rating as da'if. But it's possible that Ibn Rajab also looked into those other asanid that was known and would know.
So to follow, that would be a part of that. To see, okay, even you understand, what are those asanid? So you mentioned it, we're going to all what you mentioned. So yes, that will be a part of the person who now studying, and you understand that, they will have to know to look at all the isnad, and from the main one, and then all other ones. So you understand, to come to a final judgment. You understand? So we said to know that, so yes, the person will go through all that is mentioned. So the thing of takreej would be the person now, whatever isnad or asanid that are there, you try to gather all of them and study each of them individually. So Ibn Rajab would have done that.
In terms of further discussing the hadith, where does that leave us now? If we've come to that point where it's like...
You go with evidence that seems more clear. You go with the view that seems more clear and going according to the rules of hadith, which is that Ibn Rajab, the direction he's going, that seems more in line with the rules of ilm al-hadith.
Because you can see now, basically, Ibn Rajab, he doesn't comment any further on the hadith now, because he's graded it, so...
Each also said with each explanation, each person have their own approach. So that Ibn Rajab, that the first approach, you make takreej of hadith, then we'll discuss the hadith, if needs be. You understand? You understand? So that it may be clear that it's authentic. There doesn't need a long discussion. but because of what was mentioned by An-Nawawi in this particular hadith, that he said that not that maybe there's things that that he have contention with or disagreement with. So he's going to now put forth his side and why he believes that that judgment is not correct. So I mean, I know a more detailed discussion to some extent.
I believe in this session you mentioned authenticity and the judgment of the hadith. In the next lesson you mentioned what the hadith is about, how maybe it relates to the current time, and what is the actual meaning of the hadith. Will that mention next time?
And that comes in next part too, at some other part. So I said,
We mentioned today, but it's fine. The next time, say the next time.
okay. So I said the system that we follow regarding discussing these hadith, the system that we are following, that in most part, the lessons for each hadith will be more than one, in most part. So can we do things in a somewhat, we use the word, a system that we follow. So the system that the first, depending on the much discussion of the hadith, that will look into the Sahabi, then we'll look into discussing the hadith is authentic or not, and then we'll discuss, so we have a system of how we follow. So because of time, we're able to cover we have 5 main areas that we cover for each hadith. We want to cover 2 today. So others remain to be covered that will come in the next lesson.
Cover Sahabi, authenticity, and
Other things to come. And other things to come, inshallah. Okay, subhanallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So, some today was okay?
Okay.
Okay.